Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is reassuring America's key Asian allies. He says the Trump administration will make sure North Korea keeps its promise to get rid of its nuclear weapons. Secretary Pompeo met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing today. It comes one day after detailed talks in Seoul with the foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan. Pompeo reiterated the U.S. will not consider lifting sanctions on North Korea until denuclearization is complete. He was in Singapore earlier this week for President Trump's summit with Kim Jong-un. Joining me now is Michael Anton, former National Security Council spokesman for the Trump administration and lecturer and research fellow at Hillsdale College. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Do you think Secretary Pompeo's visit will alleviate concerns that the U.S. has made concessions to North Korea?
Well, look, he's in a difficult spot. Think about who he's had to meet with. The Japanese, the South Koreans, the Chinese. They all have different interests there. Some of those governments, the Chinese government especially, would like to see the U.S. make concessions to North Korea. So that's not reassuring to the Chinese to hear that sanctions are still going to be on. Similarly, the South Korean government right now, obviously they have different interests than China, but they have a more liberal government, whereas the Japanese have a more conservative government. Mm-hmm. So of those three countries, the one that's most concerned, that doesn't want to see any pressure come off, is Japan. South Korea, with its more left-of-center government in power right now, actually wants to see some of the tensions ease, which means they want to see some of the pressure come off because they're the most worried about a crisis in the region. So keeping those three different players with all different interests together is a difficult job for him, but that's why he gets paid the big bucks as Secretary of State.
Right. What an interesting dynamic. South Korea and Japan are also worried about another issue, which is the joint military exercises between American troops and South Korean troops, especially the consideration as to whether or not, they've halted it right now. And is their concern valid?
Well, that's something, again, that the Japanese would like to see go forward and never be interrupted. A different South Korean administration, a right-of-center government in Seoul would probably be in the same boat there. However, the Moon administration is much more willing to scale these things back, again, because their interest is in seeing reduced tensions. They think that high tensions could lead to a crisis, which could lead to war, or something, or conflict that could be obviously very harmful to South Korea. So I think what the president did is essentially say, we'll suspend this, we'll put it on hiatus, but we're not taking these things away. We can always do them again. And keep in mind that the major exercise, annual exercise that the United States does with South Korea every year is in the spring. And it already happened. So we just did it. So saying that we're not going to do the next one, which is in August, which isn't as significant, isn't much of a concession. The real question will be down the road if there hasn't been progress, if the United States keeps this moratorium on for many months, and that remains to be seen.
Critics of President Trump have really been hammering him in the media, especially when it comes to North Korea's record of human rights abuses and the fact that he met with Kim Jong-un, who has a pretty bad history on this. How do you think this compares to, for example, when President Obama met with Raul Castro, another human rights abuser, and it doesn't seem like President Obama got the same level of criticism? How do you compare, and why do you think that there was a difference between the two?
I think that, well, look, the president's critics are they have to grasp at some way to criticize him. Remember, the same people who are criticizing him now for meeting with Kim Jong-un are the ones who were saying 6 months ago that President Trump's rhetoric was too hot and was going to start a war or cause a conflict, and we should give diplomacy a chance. So now that he's giving diplomacy a chance, they're not going to just come around and become President Trump's best friends. They got to find another basis on which to criticize him. So they've chosen this. There's a big difference between Cuba and North Korea in that the last time Cuba was a nuclear threat to the United States was in the Kennedy administration in the early 60s. North Korea is a nuclear threat to the United States right now, which is why an urgent diplomatic track is being pursued, and why, while not ignoring human rights, the president talked about Otto Warmbier in his press conference after the summit. Now, that's a sore spot for the North Koreans. Essentially, their treatment of him in custody, and it resulted in his death. That's not something that they want to hear talked about. The president highlighted a North Korean defector who held up his crutches. Remember, this was a man severely injured by the North Koreans at the State of the Union. So he's shown a lot of light on North Korean human rights abuses. I think it's, understandable, or at least predictable, if unfair, for the president's critics to say, well, you went to the summit, you didn't solve all the human rights problems, therefore it just means that you don't care and you gave in. It's just politics.
Yeah, either way, it's like I said, it's going to take time for things to change in North Korea. Michael Anton, former National Security Council spokesman, lecturer, and research fellow at Hillsdale College. Thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.